Hello everyone, this is Ben Cola. It's February the 20th, 2015, and we'd like to have a 1-hour talk today. Today we're going to be talking some more about the insurance business, and you may remember that in our last talk we discussed my going into the insurance business and how exciting it was owning your own insurance agency, and how scary it was starting up and not having enough business, and the importance of having a mentor and how the mentor helped me. I want to talk about sometimes when things don't go right and maybe you need to stand up for what's right and make a point, even at your own peril. I was made an offer back in the late 1990s to open up an Allstate insurance office. Now, you may remember that I told you that in New Jersey you couldn't become an insurance agent. You had to work for the state AIP because unless you sold life insurance. But if you wanted to sell car insurance and the general lines, you pretty much had to sell through the AIP. So that's how I did my business. But I always wanted to work for an insurance company per se as an agent versus a broker. And an opportunity presented itself to me in the late 90s in the form of a letter. And the letter said, come to work for us, open up your own agency, and we'll provide support, backup, help, computers that you can use. And you would have to supply your own office location at your own cost. You will have to pay your own staff. We'll provide you some furniture. So in other words, they were providing some things, but you had to provide the actual building. And the location had to be approved by the insurance company. And to get approval from the insurance company, you had to be so many miles from another agent because they didn't want the agents too close together, which is understandable. And I thought, boy, this is great. If I could have gotten this in New Jersey, I would have done great because I could have written policies without going through the Joint Underwriting Association that turned out to be quite a nightmare, and it was quite low paying job as well. So I wrote back saying I'm interested, and they immediately sent someone out to interview me, and I was interviewed 3 times, I think, by 3 different people. And the last interview was actually at their office, the main office in Orlando. But bottom line is, they said, now what you need to do is to go and find an office, and we have to approve the location. So I said, okay, and I went out and I looked around, and the first office I found was in Lake Mary, where I lived. And Lake Mary is a high wealth neighborhood. The income levels there are very high. It would have been easy to sell policies to wealthy people. But there already was an agent in Lake Mary. Actually, there were 2. There was one on one side and one on the other. So my other choice was Sanford, and there was an agent on one side of Sanford, but it's very big, and he was almost in Lake Mary. He actually was probably in Lake Mary. He was like on the borderline. And then there was the downtown of Sanford. Now, when I say Sanford, I want to be clear. Sanford, if you remember, is the home of the Trayvon Martin case, where we had the friction between the African Americans and the white versus the black, and the shooting, and the city of Sanford is the county seat of the county of Seminole County, Florida. And it is a lower income area, and it houses a disproportionate number of African Americans. Now, these are good people. They're hardworking people. There is some crime there, but not necessarily more than you would get in the other wealthier towns. For example, even where I live in Winter Springs, our bank was robbed just about a year ago in a face-to-face armed robbery just about a mile from here. So putting that aside for a minute, I just want to tell you about the Allstate experience, because anyone who wants to find out more about me, Ben Cola, born in Philadelphia, right around the corner from the Liberty Bell, may want to may hear some information about the Allstate Insurance Company and the lawsuit that ensued following my working for the Allstate Insurance Company. Now, prior to working for the Allstate Insurance Company, I ran the Ben Cola agency in New Jersey, and I insured enough people that I was considered in the top 5 in the state. And I was very, very, very busy. I was very, very popular. I couldn't even go to the shopping store to buy groceries without running into customers who would say, "Hi, Ben." And the funny thing is, sometimes you would recognize their face, but there was no way you could remember their name. But they would recognize you because you were their insurance agent, but you had so many customers, you just didn't remember their names. So you would usually remember their face and say hi and just be pleasant. And I literally couldn't go anywhere within 20 miles of where I lived in New Jersey, and running into people that I insured. They would say, "Hi, Ben, how you doing?" And so I was quite popular that way, and I'm not bragging or in one way or another, but I guess that's just what can happen when you have a personality and you insure you have a lot of customers. Now, when I moved to Florida, my license was null and void. I had to go back to insurance school. I went to IFRAC in Orlando, Institute of Florida Real Estate Careers, and did not have a mentor like I did Clarence Stevenson in New Jersey. But I thought that at this point I was far enough along the game that I could do this on my own. In the meantime, I had to work as take any job I could get, because my real estate license was no good, my insurance license was no good. I was just out of license, and I wanted to stay in Florida because I love boating and I love fishing, and I was at the middle age of life, and I loved it so much that I wanted to spend my time boating and fishing as much as possible from the middle of my life to the end of my life. And having year-round exposure to the water and to the fishing, to me, seemed like a good idea, and it would lead to ultimately a happier life. And so I had to go back to school for both real estate and insurance. But anyway, getting back to the Allstate case, which you may hear or have heard about already. If you live in Florida, you surely have heard about Allstate losing its license several years ago and having to pay a $25 million fine to the state of Florida. That fine was a result of the complaint that I filed against Allstate Insurance Company and et al., because there were several divisions of the Allstate Insurance Company that I sued, and a man named Ed Liddy in his capacity. Nothing personal grudge against Ed Liddy, but Ed Liddy, in case you don't know who he is, was the chief executive officer of the bailed out AIG Insurance Company, the only insurance company ever to get a bailout. When they had the bailouts, when the bubble hit, the banks were bailed out, but one insurance company was bailed out as well. After it was bailed out, the CEO, I think his name was Greenberg, was ousted, and Mr. Liddy, who was running Allstate at the time I worked for Allstate, swapped jobs. I think he was forced out of Allstate, probably because of the fine. I don't know. I don't want to say anything wrong, and I honestly never, frankly, met Mr. Liddy, so I just saw him in court when I was in court, but we never spoke. So I don't know enough about him. I mean, I think someday maybe we should sit down and drink a cup of coffee or have a meal together, and maybe maybe it'll turn out to be friends. I don't know. But let me just get back to the story here, because you're probably going to hear about it. if you investigate who I am and where I came from and a controversy in Allstate, because things offered the Allstate experience to a piece of paper. I had $80,000 or that I had a partner or someone back me or had eight. Otherwise, they wouldn't Allstate agent, because I was building. I was going to have to pay the cost of the staff. I was going to have to pay the phone bill, and they also knew that you wouldn't have insurance business. As I said yesterday, when a policy would renew every year, would get a renewal commission. When you're starting out and you're a new agent, you don't have any old customers, so you're not getting any renewals. The only money that you're going to make is from the new business that you write. And since you're the new guy on the block, the people in the area don't even know you're there yet. Sometimes it takes a year or two for them to realize that a new business opened up on the corner. And so frankly, it does take a while to build up your name. And it took 3 years for me to make a profit in the Ben Cola agency, which it turned out to be a really good gig. And but as far as Allstate it was concerned, they knew right up front that you were going to have negative cash flows. So I had to sign this document basically stating that I was willing to basically piss away $80,000 in an effort to make Allstate money. The other thing that they asked for was that I sign away my right to sell insurance with other insurance companies. For example, at the time Allstate approached me, after I finally got my Florida license, I was doing business with Progressive Insurance Agency as an independent agent, and one or two others as a broker. So if you came to me, I could write you a Progressive insurance policy. You've all heard of Progressive Insurance Company. It's a well-known company. And I even won a sales award with Progressive Insurance Company. I should have brought it with me. It's a little Progressive car, and I won it for making the best sales presentation. And it wasn't that I sold the most amount of policies, because I was a new guy on the block and I hadn't really had enough time selling up policies. But we had a contest one day where they made all the agents go up on a stage and present a role-playing sales pitch to sell an insurance policy. And I won flat out the contest, and I was given this car. I don't know if you want to go and get the car. It's in the other office, and bring in your good shout to everybody. But the other thing I want to say is that while I was waiting to get my insurance license in the state of Florida, because my New Jersey license was no good and I became a resident of Florida, I had to do something to make a living. So I worked as a telemarketer for a company called Evergreen Sales and Marketing. Evergreen Sales and Marketing is a subcontractor for the Disney Corporation. So if you're working for Evergreen, you're basically working for the Disney company, and in more particular, you're working for the Disney Channel, as in the Disney Channel television. And your job was to sell people a subscription to the Disney Channel on television. So you would have to tell them about the programming of the Disney Channel, and you would call existing customers. There weren't cold calls, and you didn't have to dial the phone. It was all automated, and you would talk to thousands of people per night. And there were about 100 people on the phones, and then the phone would call a new person every several seconds, so you didn't spend more than a minute or two on the phone with any one person. And you simply asked them if they wanted the Disney Channel or not, and you had a few things that you were allowed to say, and you had to stay on script. You weren't allowed to say anything that wasn't on that script. So now imagine a company where everyone has to say the same thing, and it's basically not what you're saying because everyone's saying the same thing, or you would be summarily dismissed. It was how you said it, and whether or not the customers enjoy talking to you, whether you were able to answer their questions. And I guess maybe the likability factor kind of had something to do with it as well. In any case, I won 11 Evergreen Awards for sales and marketing quality. I also was monitored unknown, because they would secretly listen to your telephone calls, kind of like the NSA does, I suppose, today. But you knew that they were listening to you all the time. And I later became a trained telephone monitor, and I listened to the other fellows. After I became successful, on the phone, they promoted me into management, and then I would listen on headphones to the other salespeople talking to the customers. I would pull them into my office and advise them. When they say this, you say that, and you just don't have a good tone of voice. There's something wrong with your enthusiasm and excitement level in your voice, and energy level isn't right, whatever. But to win one of these evergreen awards is practically impossible. I challenge anyone to try to win one of these things. Go to work for Evergreen, they'll hire you, and good luck. If you can win an Evergreen Award, I would be happy to buy you a pizza and a big meal, and you talk about your experience. But it is hard. I won 11 of them, so I proved to be a good salesman. And I think I proved to be a good salesman in selling 10,000 insurance policies in the state of New Jersey. But getting back to, once I got my insurance license in the state of Florida, I started to get business right away rolling as an independent agent in the state of Florida with the insurance office here, because I was frankly living in Florida now and wanted to do the same thing and start my career here. And so when the Allstate letter came to me, I thought this was a godsend. But the $80,000 was a bit of a problem. I was able to round up some backers, and I did have a line of credit at a bank, and I was able to get enough money lined up, signed up, provable, and they verified it, Allstate underwriters, and they gave me the okay to be an agent. They did a background check on me. They discovered that I was a top evergreen salesman, an award-winning salesman. They looked into my past history, took fingerprints, DNA, blood test, the whole deal, and agreed to hire me. Then they said, go find an office. So in looking for an office, like I said, I ran into the problems with other agents, because there were agents all around, Allstate agents. They were very close together. They seemed to be closer together here than they were in New Jersey, much closer together. And so it was hard to find a location where there wasn't a conflict between my new location, proposed new location, and someone who had been there for years and just didn't want a new competitor moving in selling Allstate next to their office. So, and furthermore, Allstate wouldn't allow that. So I ended up getting sort of forced in a way into the old section of Sanford. Now at the time, now I'm going back to the late 1990s, 1999, at the time Sanford was sort of run down. And it's a little bit sort of run down looking now, but it's on the upswing. And there was a plan in place to redevelop the city, because the city is very old. I mean, this city is hundreds of years old. Used to be a shipping port. You've got the St. Johns River coming from Jacksonville down to service Sanford, and so they had a shipping port there at Lake Monroe. And my office, the one I chose, was a dilapidated, semi-condemned building right at the corner of First Avenue and Sanford Avenue in downtown Sanford. So I was basically in a building at the end of a row of buildings, the first one in line, facing the river. And I had a gut feeling that someday, after the development of Sanford was complete, that I would be in the middle of things. I would be in the downtown center of town. The plan was they were going to upgrade the streets, they were going to put in water fountains, they were going to put in a new post office across the street. The post office was there already, but it was really dilapidated. I mean, it just looked like hell. The buildings were all boarded up. The ceiling of the building that I got involved with, there was no ceiling. I had to put the ceiling in, and no floor, there were no walls. It was basically a bombed out shell, and I was able to negotiate a lease with an option to buy the building. And I leased the building for, oh, I think $750 a month. And I had a $70,000, $72,000 right to buy the building, right of first refusal. And so I signed the lease, and I was responsible for fixing the building up, and boy, did it cost. I brought in a fellow by the name of Paul, who was helping me fix the building, and he was a carpenter, and put all new ceilings in, walls, doors, floors. We put new partition walls in. I mean, it was a nightmare, but we turned that building around. I mean, we really turned it into what Allstate admitted to the most beautiful Allstate office in the entire country, and from a bombed out shell. I mean, that's what I put into this thing. Now, in the meantime, I had to go to school, and I had to pass a couple of difficult tests. So while this building was being built, I couldn't work out of it because it wasn't, the government wasn't allowing me into the building until it was finished. And I wasn't allowed to have a sign up yet because I wasn't allowed to put up the usual fluorescent Allstate sign. Allstate required you to have a sign, and the sign was the standard fluorescent sign that says Allstate. But in the Sanford section, because it was the old historic district, you were not allowed to have a fluorescent sign. So I had to go before the board, and it took months and months, and I had to plead my case, and for some reason they kind of made life pretty difficult for you. You know how these guys could be, and maybe they wanted to pay off or kickback, which I'm not into that. I just said, look, you're going to be helping your community by allowing a brand new Allstate office to open, and we are fixing this building up that would ordinarily have been condemned. And the building was for sale, but no one was going to buy the building. It was just a bombed out shell of a frame of the building. So we fixed the building up. I finally was able to talk the city commissioners in a meeting into allowing me to have a hand-carved wooden sign. I mean, it was literally carved by a machine, or it was engraved in deep, thick wood and painted, hand-painted, and it had a light with a pole shining, an incandescent, sort of a yellowish colored light at it. And I had to have that as my sign on my building because I wasn't allowed to be in the historic section of Sanford with a modern Allstate sign. So that kind of put me at a disadvantage because that sign was very hard to see in comparison to a normal Allstate sign that lit up at night bright. So the furniture arrived finally after the building was done. It took longer to complete than we thought. These kind of repairs usually do when you're talking about rehabbing an entire building. So in the meantime, I sort of fell behind in how many policies they were expecting me to write. But nevertheless, I completed what I was told that I needed to do to stay on as an Allstate agent, because every year and a half they would have to re-up your contract. Otherwise, you could lose your right to work for the company. And in the meantime, you remember they made me sign, and the other agents, I guess, had to sign too, your right to write business for anybody else. In other words, there was an exclusivity contract that you would only insure and only work for and on the behalf of the Allstate Insurance Company if you took the job. Or the franchise. I think it was a franchise because you had to pay to get in. So bottom line is, it was very expensive. It was an investment in my future, and I felt confident I could do it because I had built this thing up in New Jersey before without having the help of a major insurance company behind me, and I felt fairly comfortable on those lines. But I knew deep in my heart it was going to take a while to get this thing rolling. And so then, once the office opened, the insurance company called us to a meeting, and they handed out set of books. And these books said, we are going to change the way we do business. And I thought, gee, you know, the insurance business is very old. It's one of the oldest businesses in the world. Why are you changing the business now? You're a profitable corporation. You're very popular. You're number one insurance company. Maybe that's questionable as to comparing it to State Farm now, but at the time it was the largest stock-owned insurance company where they had stocks selling on the New York Stock Exchange. But the bottom line was they said that they were going to start scrutinizing people based on where they lived. And that raised red flags with me, saying, well, now that's redlining. If you take a map and draw a red line around an area and say, we don't want to insure people here, or we will only insure people here if there's some other benefit to it that might be extraordinary or very hard to match. I knew I was in trouble because I was in an area that was financially challenged. Many African Americans and low-income white people, and I thought that even knowing this going into the game, into the franchise, that I could insure a segment of the population where I felt that I could make a pretty good living over a period of time building up renewals. But now suddenly we had this thing called the new business model that they rolled out. Now the new business model not only had a red line around it, but it also said we are going to start taking people's credit into account with respect to their driver's license. And I said, well, if their driver's license is bad, we know they're likely to have troubles in the future, because if they've had 3 or 4 accidents, then maybe you want to consider not insuring these people, or if you're going to insure them, you want to charge them a lot of money to make up for the added risk. But the new business model plan that Allstate rolled out was completely out of left field, and they started to talk about credit. They said, well, if your credit's not good, we're not going to give you an insurance policy. And I thought, well, dear God, the people in my area aren't going to have the best credit because they're poor people. Many of them are renting, and where they don't own their own house, but they have a car. And so I'm in a financially challenged area, and I want to stick up for these people. And I just invested $80,000 in this building in an African American neighborhood full of poor white people, and I'm here to stick up for these people. I don't discriminate, never did. I have always stood up for the poor guy and the guy who's down on his luck. I've done everything in my power. So I immediately stood up and objected and said, look, my first impression was these people are paying their insurance policy ahead of time. In other words, we're not giving you an insurance policy for $1,000 a year unless you pay us $1,000 a year now, or agree to pay $100 a month, and you pay the first $100 now, and then if you don't pay, we're going to give you a cancellation notice. They said, no, Ben, that's not what we're doing here. We are not going to insure these people if their credit is shaky, or if they don't have any credit at all, even by their own choice. They're called, they would call those people a no-hit. And I said, well, many people choose not to borrow money, especially if they don't have a steady job, and they may want to be not like the government of the United States or some big corporation that wants to borrow and borrow and borrow, but maybe they want to live a fiscally sound life, so they make a business decision, a lifelong business decision not to borrow money, and they deal on a cash basis. Doesn't make you a criminal. But the Allstate company said, no, what we are doing here is we have a new algorithm that proves that if you have something wrong with your credit, that you're going to have a car accident. And I said, that's preposterous. I said, no one insures more cars than me. I said, and you can't do this. These people are paying for their policies up front, And you can't tell someone who has driven 500,000 miles and doesn't have any infractions on their driving record and hasn't had an accident. You can't tell me that that person's going to have an accident because they lost their job last year and their Visa card payment got behind, and now you're going to charge them twice as much for their insurance if you do insure them, or you're going to not insure them at all, forcing them to go somewhere where the policy costs more. And the Allstate policies were generally cheaper than some of the other companies. That was one of the reasons I went there, because I thought that I would have an edge with regard to the rates. But oh no, it had nothing to do with whether or not you would pay your premium. Absolutely nothing at all. The point of this whole thing was they said that they could prove using an algorithm that if you had even a slight blemish on your credit report, that they needed to charge you more money for your car insurance or deny you flat out. Mostly would deny you a car insurance policy. In other words, they were looking for a reason to deny you. So now they had a new business model right after I invested my life savings and rebuilt a condemned building in downtown Sanford, trying to help the people of Sanford, the poor, downtrodden people of Sanford, the African Americans who live there, the Latinos and the poorer white people, and without regard for trying to become rich or whatever, just trying to help these people. And also, remember, I was selling the mutual fund, so I was encouraging them to save $20 a month into a mutual fund, or $50 a month, or whatever they could afford. And so I was selling mutual funds as well, which I sold more than I needed to quota-wise the mutual funds. Now, I had to get a license to sell those mutual funds, so I went into school, and I had to stop selling insurance for a while because I had to go to school and pass my Series 6 and 63 so that I could sell cross state lines, and I could sell mutual funds all over the place to my customers. And I was helping the poor people and the people who were financially challenged learn how to save money. And I thought that I was doing a noble thing. But then when they went to get their car insurance, the insurance company would say, no, we're sorry, we can't sell you a car insurance policy because your Visa card payment was 30 days late last year, and so we're not going to be able to sell you a car insurance policy. Or if you lived in the area where the red line was drawn, they would make it even harder. And furthermore, when I inquired of my manager, give me more information about this algorithm. My father is a mathematician. I would like to have him look into this. I would like to look into this myself from the standpoint of it just being a bad business practice and it being discriminatory and redlining and violating every rule in the book as far as I could see, especially harming poor people. And believe me, I am right there and standing up for the poor people, and I fought so hard for the right to sell policies to people who were financially challenged and to get them with a good solid company, get them saving money in a Fidelity mutual fund, get them an Allstate insurance policy, get them financially sound on their feet. And I thought that anything along those lines could only help those people. And I was not afraid to open up and invest $80,000 in a blown out building in Sanford in an effort to help those people. Most agents, I'm sorry to say, would say, no, I don't want to deal with those people. I want to deal with the rich people, and they can take the poor people and let them starve. I don't care. I wasn't about giving them anything other than I was about helping them learn how to save, how to invest, and how to maintain a proper insurance policy, proper insurance on their home. But Allstate wanted no part of the agency. And we turned away hundreds, I would venture to say thousands of customers that came in the door and asked for insurance, and when we would put their information in the computer would say rejected, or it would say they had to put the premium was so high it was completely insane and they could get a cheaper policy if they went to Lloyd's of London, which, by the way, is a way of buying insurance if you can't buy insurance anywhere else. It's called surplus lines, and the rates are like 3 or 4 times normal. But these people would end up having to go somewhere else for insurance. So that denied them based on a premise and a theory only that people who had financial challenges would have a car accident, when in fact they had long driving histories that proved that they were good drivers and they did not have car accidents. And furthermore, I argued with the Allstate managers and I said, look, in any case, these people are not taking large policies. I said, because they're not millionaires, they're not going to buy $1 million policy. Therefore, if there's a bad accident, you're only going to be paying maybe a $10,000 claim. So if you think about it from the standpoint of you're going to have a lot of customers and each one is going to be, at the worst possible scenario, a maximum claim of $10,000 or $15,000, because a lot of them would take a minimal policy. You know, you're taking in a $600 premium or $800 premium, and then you're going to pay out $10,000 if the worst happens. So, you know, I just didn't understand it when right up the road you had people living in Lake Mary who were maybe making $250,000 a year, and their premium would be $400 a year, but their insurance was $1 million. And as soon as somebody would be hurt in a car accident with someone in a wealthier neighborhood like Lake Mary, the first thing they do would be to call their lawyer. Now, the people in Sanford, the poor African Americans there, they didn't have a lawyer. They would just probably settle with the adjuster for a settlement. And but the wealthy, as it turned out later, I was right, because the wealthier people in Lake Mary would not take a small settlement. The settlement would be maybe $500,000. And the premium was very low because their credit was very, very high. So they had high credit and they had a lot of insurance for a very small amount of money. And that was a lousy investment, as far as I was concerned, for the Allstate Insurance Company. But they just didn't want to listen to me. And we ended up having a major blowout over this whole thing. My manager left, and my mentor, after he heard that I was against this philosophy and coming down on the poor black community, that they were being redlined and that I was going to file complaints and up to the highest level, and I was going to get this reversed, this absolute horror. Moreover, I had invested my life savings into building this building in this neighborhood, trying to bring the neighborhood up, which I was doing. The post office, right after I rebuilt my building, built a brand new beautiful post office with flying flags and brand new palm trees and landscaping right across the street from my brand new Allstate office. And we actually started to make the property look better. And now the building has got a cobblestone, brand new cobblestone brick streets. They've got fountains with water flowing out of them. I mean, it's absolutely gorgeous. And I'm not there anymore because I was dismissed. And my final review, because they would give you a review every so many months. My final review said that my book of business, in other words, the customers that I was able to get through underwriting, was profitable. My book of business was profitable. Although they did check off, they said that I wasn't working within their guidelines, which is complete crap, because you couldn't do anything without putting it through their computer, and their computer had to say yes, and they generated all the policies. You couldn't write your own policy in the office. You could insure someone on a temporary binder, but they would be summarily terminated by underwriting as soon as anything happened. So you can't do that. You would basically have to put their data into the computer. And you knew right away if they were African Americans that Allstate would just turn them down, unless their credit rating was super high or they were some kind of special person or had some kind of political pull. And so it ended up that we parted ways. The building, which I had a right to buy for $73,000 due to the fact that it needed fixing up, the price to purchase the building was only $70-some thousand. After I fixed the building up, the building sold for, I think, $230,000 or $270,000 as a result of my work and effort fixing the building up. That's how much fixing up we did. Now I have a video, by the way, which we were able to retrieve from archives because we had been burglarized in 2010 and we lost the camera. That was the only camera that could translate the videotape, and all the computers were stolen as well. So luckily the tape was still here, and we were able to buy a used camera, the only kind of camera that could translate the tape, and it's herky-jerky and whatever, but I'm going to post that so you can see how evil these people are. In the end, a lawsuit ensued, and the Allstate insurance company called me the last day, and they said, we're going to come down and scrape your name off the door, and our name, we're going to take our signs down. They ripped my walls apart, taking the signs down, walls that I had paid to put up, thus damaging my building. And they took all the files and the clients. Don't know, they said they were going to hand them out to other agents, and I was very angry about it. Then the telephone rang, and it was a woman on the other end, and she was told me that she had to read me a script. She said, I'm going to read this to you. I'm not allowed to talk about it, but I have to read this statement to you. And it basically said that if I sell insurance ever again to anybody else through Allstate, which of course they said I couldn't sell Allstate products because I was hereby terminated due to differences of philosophy, and reminding me that I was not allowed to sell insurance for any other insurance company. So in other words, I wasn't allowed to go back to Progressive. And I thought, well, screw them, I'll call Progressive up on the telephone. And I found out that it wasn't until years later, after I had signed the exclusivity agreement with Allstate Insurance Company in the late 90s, it wasn't until 2001 when we parted ways that they actually sent that termination letter into Progressive. And I had been a Progressive agent that whole time. Legally, I could have sold a Progressive policy out of Allstate. Well, of course, I would have been breaching my Allstate contract, and I wouldn't have done that because I made a promise and I stick to my promises. But in any case, the evilness of Allstate goes beyond belief in the fact that even after they terminated me, they threatened me on the phone that they would sue me if I sold insurance because even though they said they terminated me because I didn't sell enough policies, it was Allstate that was rejecting the local African Americans in the neighborhood there and the people who had somewhat of a credit problem but not bad driving records. It was Allstate who rejected these policies. Then they turned around and said that the office didn't sell enough policies. It was a complete lie. And the book of business that was written was profitable, and that they would pay me a commission only on these people. So what difference does it make if I sold a few less policies? I chose to stay on. They said no. They said, we will offer you the chance to move to Lake Mary and be a subordinate to another agency owner and work as an agent out of another office, but you're not allowed to stay in this red-lined black area. Now, of course, this is not in writing. I'm telling you this, I'll give you sworn testimony right now. This actually happened. So they cut me off my ability to sell insurance by mailing into the Insurance Commission in the state of Florida my document canceling my right to do business with other insurance companies, namely Progressive, and I think there were one or two others. But they waited until after they knew that I wasn't going to be working for them anymore. They wanted to make sure that if I wasn't working for them, that no one else could have me. So how could they say that I was not a good producer? They were afraid that I was going to suck up all the business and by moving to another office or maybe even sitting where I was. But I did sign a non-compete, and they said they would enforce that and they would come after me with the full force of Allstate and their attorneys, their shill attorneys, and sue me for millions of dollars if I filed insure even a single policy with another insurance company. And then after they terminated me, they sent those letters canceling where I agreed to cancel myself out as working for Progressive Insurance Company. They actually waited, so they cut off my job opportunity. Now I suppose I could have picked the phone up and called, but then I would have been Progressive had taken me back. I did win the award with Progressive, but they would have sued me for breach of contract, since I did promise not to sell for anyone. I did promise not to sell. I signed a non-compete, but to me, I felt like they had breached. Wasn't the non-compete they breached, but they had breached the fiduciary duty. I felt that they had a fiduciary duty to tell me when they sold me the Allstate franchise, and it was a franchise as far as I was concerned, because I had to pay to get in. Under Florida law, if they are having plans and that they know about those plans when you take the franchise, and the plans are that they're not going to sell their product in that area, they should certainly warn you before you open up a business and put all your life savings into fixing that building up and putting up a sign. For example, let's say you had a McDonald's, you wanted to buy a McDonald's franchise, and McDonald's sells you a franchise, and they sell you the franchise with the full knowledge that next month they're going to go out of business and they're not going to sell hamburgers anymore. Well, that's what Allstate did to me. They knew when they sold me that franchise, and to that office in that location, they had information that they knew they weren't going to sell policies in that area, yet they let me invest my life savings there. So I sued them for a franchise violation, I sued them for discrimination, I sued them for redlining, and the paperwork is horrendous. Now, I don't have it all here, but the actual paperwork on the lawsuit, me fighting for the poor people in the city of Sanford, mostly the black people and the Latino community, was absolutely insane. I filed my lawsuit in Seminole County Court, which was literally 3 or 4 blocks from my office, and within a couple of days, and I served my complaint against the Insurance Commission. So the Insurance Commission had a copy of my grievance, and my grievance was hundreds of pages long, and so much evidence that each packet probably weighed about 10 pounds. The shipping alone was outrageous. I've simultaneously filed a complaint with the Equal Opportunity Employment Commission and Wage and Hour and about 5 other agencies, and none of them responded. The Equal Opportunity Employment Commission sent a letter back to me asking me to dismiss my complaint against them with a form saying sign here, and I put down no, absolutely not, and I put down I reject signing, and I sent it back to them and never heard a word after that. In the meantime, the state of Florida went after them, and simultaneously my lawsuit started up. So my lawsuit, within days of filing my lawsuit against Allstate and Ed Liddy, was withdrawn from the local court and taken into the federal court. I think the Allstate Insurance Company knew that, God forbid, I get a jury trial in Sanford where I had fixed this building up, and any jurors from the local area who saw that building now finally fixed up after being practically condemned, and that they didn't, and hearing my story, that they didn't want to insure the local people with this baloney crap about having to have good credit to buy a car insurance policy when your driving record is perfectly fine if you're African American or you live in an African American neighborhood or a Latino neighborhood. I fought hard, and I fought with every ounce of my life. And the other thing is, I tried to hire an attorney to take the case because I just didn't think this was something I could handle. It was the case was taken. 9 security guards along with 9 or 10 attorneys came in. The court clerk told me she was scared to death when 20 men came into the office, and they took the case, literally demanded the case, and they paid a big fee, and they removed, it's called removal, or they removed the case from the Seminole County Court jurisdiction, and they moved it into the federal court jurisdiction with the headquarters in Orlando, Florida. Within a day of that happening, I received a notice the case was removed. I received an order from the court, the federal court, that said I had a restraining order on me. I was not allowed to discuss the matter with anybody. I was not allowed to, even though I had a legitimate lawsuit going, I was not allowed to ask for depositions. So I wasn't allowed to depose anybody. I wasn't allowed to have interrogatories. I wasn't allowed to discuss the matter with anybody. I basically had a gag order slammed on me, and I was not allowed to discuss the matter. So meanwhile, Allstate's bad-mouthing me all around town, saying I couldn't sell policies, and I've got this lawsuit going against them, and I'm not allowed to say anything. So I'm following the law, not saying anything, while these people are doing bad things. In the meantime, the case was summarily dismissed by the federal court, and basically the federal court said that I was only an employee, even though I put all this money up, and I was working in a right-to-work state. By the way, a right-to-work state means that you don't have any right to work. It means it's the opposite. It means that they can terminate you for any reason or no reason at all. They can terminate you for the color of your eyes, the color of your skin, your hair color, how you sound on the telephone. They can terminate you for how you dress. They could terminate you for any reason or no reason at all. That is the law. And I can tell you, I had to go this pro se because no lawyer would take the case. Let me go back and talk about that for a minute. I couldn't get a lawyer to pursue my case. My own lawyer said I can't pursue the case because there's no insurance behind it. I said, well, we're suing the insurance company. He said, yeah, but it's not backed by an insurance contract, which was kind of stupid. I just think he didn't want. And he said, I can't handle the paperwork. I went to another firm, and they said the same thing. They said we couldn't handle the paperwork if we wanted to, because this is going to be thousands of pages of paperwork. Number one. Number two, we have a restraining order. We were not allowed to depose anybody, so you're not going to be able to call witnesses. And they're saying that their desire to use credit as a means to determine whether you're insurable or not on your car is a trade secret. A trade secret is a secret, literally, and they don't have to disclose a trade secret. And so I appealed the case all the way up to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. Asked more lawyers to try to take the case, and they wouldn't. The main reason given to me that no lawyer would take the case was not that it wasn't a good case. They all thought it was a good case. They wouldn't take the case because they said, we have people having automobile accidents every day, every week, and many of them have Allstate insurance. And if we sue them over this matter, we'll have a hard time. They'll get a grudge against us, and we won't be able to make good settlements for our car insurance crash victims. So that left me hanging, and no other way to sue Allstate over this. I wasn't allowed to use any evidence I had, and I had a pile of it, but I wasn't allowed to subpoena anybody. I wasn't allowed to get interrogatories or subpoena any of the people that were turned away, or my secretaries either. I wasn't allowed to talk to them as well. So to make a long story short, the matter ended up in the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals in Atlanta, Georgia. Believe it or not, I actually managed to get oral argument pro se before Judge Anderson. I can't remember the other justice's name, but there were 3 justices, and I was only allowed 15 minutes. Now remember, this lawsuit was hundreds of pages long. It was so long that the court clerk said to me, we can't take your lawsuit because it's so long that it has to be in 2 books, and it has to have a blue cover. And I said, what difference does it make have to have a blue color? Well, it has to be put in a binder, and you have to put a blue cover to it, and you're not allowed to have more than so many hundreds of papers in each one. And I had far exceeded the limitation because the book was this thick. So they made me divide the book, and I think they were just trying to throw me off the track, hoping I would go away. And but I didn't, because I was fighting hard for the poor people who are downtrodden in Sanford. And I tell you what, I lost years of my life fighting these people, and I wrote the entire lawsuit myself, and it was a very big deal. But bottom line is, I ended up putting it into 2 books. I drove all the way back up to Atlanta, made sure that it was stamped in at the clerk's office, and when my day to come to court and plead my case, I was only given 15 minutes. Can you imagine? We have hundreds and hundreds of pages. I was only allowed 15 minutes. And as you may well imagine, the result was the same. They said that I was only an employee and they could do anything they wanted to me. The Judge Anderson said to the Allstate attorney who was there, if you did this to a lot of agents, would you make a lot of money? And the Allstate lawyer said, yes, Your Honor. The next question from the justice to the Allstate attorney, did you pay Ben Cola any money for the book of business that he wrote? And the answer from Allstate attorneys were, no, we didn't. And then it was followed up by the question was, well, if you did this to a lot of agents, would you make a lot of money? And they said yes. So basically ripped me off, and then they wrote basically that I lost because I was only an employee and they could terminate me whenever they wanted. But remember, they terminated my right to do business elsewhere as well. And that's when I became an insurance adjuster, because I wasn't allowed to sell insurance anymore. The only thing I could convert my license to was to be an adjuster, where I wouldn't violate my contract with Allstate. And that's basically the story there. Now, meanwhile, the state of Florida pursued my complaint, asked them the same thing. Allstate refused to turn over any records, and the Supreme Court of the state of Florida said, well, we can't order them to turn over these secrets and the secret underwriting, but if you want to revoke their license, you can. They did revoke their license over this, and because Allstate wouldn't turn over the information, so Insurance Commission of Florida revoked their license. It was in the newspaper, and then I got nothing out of it, even as a whistleblower, nothing at all. But bottom line was they lost their license. 2 weeks later, they cut a deal for $25 million, and the deal went something like this. Allstate pays $25 million, and in return, the government, the Insurance Commission, promises not to ask any questions about how Allstate generates its rates or redlining or its algorithm regarding credit. So now we have an insurance company called Allstate running around the state of Florida, rogue, doing anything it wants. By paying a $25 million fine, they didn't have to turn over any documents as to what they're doing or how they underwrite their clients. And I just think that's wrong, because the insurance business is a controlled business. The rates are controlled, and these people are making up the rules as they go. And for a fee, a fine, a fee called a fine, which it was, they paid $25 million, and now they can pretty much do anything they want. And so that's just the way things go. I want you to know that I'm a guy who stands up for the little guy, and I fought hard. I fought with all my might, and I'm still looking for some money from this. I do believe the local lawsuit is still active, even though it's years later, because the case was pulled into the federal court. I think the state issues still are outstanding, and I'm going to be asking for reparations along those lines. And Mr. Ed Liddy, I don't want to say anything bad about you because I never met you, but I do know that you stand dead strong behind the credit thing. But I noticed that you didn't last more than 1 year on your AIG job. So how does it feel to get terminated by the Congress of the United States for not terminating? I know they wanted you to terminate all the AIG agents, but it looks like you couldn't terminate them. Couldn't terminate them because they all had clients that were multimillionaires, and if you had terminated those agents, they would have just moved that business to another company. So you couldn't terminate those agents because their books of business were too large. But you sure could tear me up because I was a new guy and I was insuring poor people that you just didn't care about. But the Congress of the United States terminated you, didn't they? So anyway, one day I hope we can talk and maybe we can reconcile our differences. I'm holding no personal grudge against you. I just I'm sorry this whole thing happened. I'm going to post a disc that everyone can see, and my story of the last day I worked for Allstate. I made a little video. It was finally recovered because the camera that took it was not able, it was stolen and was not able to render the material, but we rendered it now, and so it's herky-jerky, but we're going to put that up on YouTube so everybody can see. Thank you very much, everybody. So I'm taking my jacket off because it's getting a little warm in here.